Okay. Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you could join us this evening. This is a little new to many of us. Only our MONEP's second time on Zoom. Tonight's meeting is going to be shared with the International Dark Sky Association, and the lead doing the Zoom is the President, Don Ficken.
Okay.
Glad you could join us. I want to thank both Don and International Dark Sky. And I encourage the MONEP members to look them up. It's a very interesting group. They've been extremely helpful with working or to work with. And for the IDA members, please take time to look up MONEP. And we are doing an adjustment to our website, so that might be changing in the near future. For the people who are outside of the MONEP organization, it stands for Missouri Nature and Environmental Photographers. We are in our 25th year this year, and generally our meetings are at Powder Valley on the third Tuesday of each month. However, with everything that's going on, we have been trying to Zoom Outlook so far and had a lot of success with it. So stay with us and we'll kind of keep going with that. We have a program set up for next month. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Just a quick lead. How it's going to work is I'm the president of MONEP. I will start off, obviously. Then I'm going to, over a few comments, I will turn it over to Don Ficken. And then he will turn it over to a MONEP member, Ken Biddle, to introduce our speaker. The program should be approximately 40 minutes or so. And we're going to hold questions and answers till afterwards. That will be about 20 minutes. So there'll be a few things that we'll go over at that point in time, and Don will fill you in more on Zoom and a little bit on International Dark Sky. Now, for the people who are not MONEP members, not every meeting that we have is photo related. We have presentations that somewhat alternate. Tonight's obviously will be photo based. Our next meeting would be from Laura Connolly with the Department of Conservation about bears in Missouri. And then that will actually be, I'm sorry, our August meeting, not next. So some of our meetings are directly related to nature, the outdoor, the environment, and some are entirely based on photography. Well, we do have all professional photographers. The skill level is varied. We love to have new people come in and share some of our experiences with them and for them to share theirs.
Lonnie Gatlin.
Please check us out, and if you have questions, let us know. I'm going to keep my comments as brief as possible. For the MONEP members, expect something to come to you in the next week or so that will give us some more information, and including a short survey. So what we need to do is find out when people feel safe to come back out. And again, that was related to Powder Valley. They're still not open physically. So we're going to have to concern ourselves in that. And we're going to have a few questions on meetings and field trips, a few other items. What I would like you to do is there are going to be a couple optional items. So if you have comments, feel free to put them in. And please take time to fill this out. I can guarantee every survey we've done, we've reviewed very thoroughly and tried to pay attention to what everybody said.
That's all right.
Yeah.
If you have not renewed, please go ahead and do so at this time.
I don't know. I don't see his microphone.
Hang on a second, Eris. Let me mute everybody for a second, Scott.
So we'll have other people, yes.
There you go.
Okay, great. So if you have not renewed, please check. And then also check, if you don't know if you've renewed or not, check with Michelle or Barb, and we can let you know that. If you could get your renewals in, that would be great. Our July meeting is going to be another co-meeting, and that's going to be with the St. Louis Camera Club. And we will be bringing in nationally known photographer Charles Needle. And that will be a Zoom presentation also. As many of you know, we were planning on having Charles come in April and also do a workshop with the coronavirus that was canceled. We are trying to plan that for next year. And as many people know, a lot is in limbo, but we're going to try and recreate that for next April. The one change on this, due to his scheduling, is it will be on a Monday, July 20th. So that's one of the few times we'll alternate off of our third Tuesday meeting. But due to his schedule, that was the night that he could do it. And we'll keep you abreast with more reminders as this gets closer and the exact time. I believe we're going to stick with 7 o'clock as of right now with our Zoom presentations. That's the plan. Subject to change, again, depending on what other things are going on. But we do have Charles Needle locked in, and the subject will be creativity. I can guarantee it will be entertaining and educational. So after that, we plan on returning to the third Tuesday of each month for our future meetings. Where they will be, well, again, we're going to be doing at least July via Zoom. And then after that, we'll just have to see what the surveys say and what our options are. With the advent of having to do Zoom, the advantage we're having is we may look in the future of bringing more out of state, out of country speakers in to present to us. Well, I think that's a real good option we have that we did not have in the past. So we will look at that, and we're also reviewing the option of maybe doing a Zoom meeting in January when the weather isn't as good, things like that. So we're going to make this an opportunity the best we can. For the people that didn't notice, I'll just do one quick thing. Diversified has a sale, 20% off metal prints. If you notice, that email was sent out, and then that ends, wraps up June 18th, Thursday. And if you notice the amazing image that was on there, that's from our member Scott Evers of the Blue Morpho. So congrats to Scott Evers. And I think for my questions and comments, that covers it. So I'm going to turn it over to Don Ficken, president of IDA. And again, I would like to thank both he and the association for hosting this and being so helpful in us. So Don, take it away.
Thank you. All right, just give me a moment here to get things geared up. You guys should be able to see that okay?
Okay,
Yep,
good.
Great.
Now it's clear, yes.
Awesome, cool. Thanks, guys. Well, first off, it's a pleasure to be as part of this group. First off, as a new member, so I'm glad to be part of a new member of this group, as well as learning a little bit about photography and spreading the word about a group that I'm involved with called the Missouri chapter of the International Dark Sky Association. And a lot of people may not know that much about it, but it is actually a very large global organization covering multiple countries with multiple chapters throughout the world. And most of us don't think that much about light pollution, but it's increasing something like 2% per year globally, and about a third of mankind can't even see the Milky Way. And so you might think, well, who cares about the Milky Way? Well, that's true, but it does also have impact on life on Earth, everything from bugs to flowers to human health to energy. In many ways, our chapter is fairly new, just a little over a year old. It's an active statewide chapter. And one of the things that I'd love to get from this group would be some photos of the night sky. We're trying to showcase what's going on in our state. I encourage you to check out our website, which is darkskymissouri.org. Again, we've got a very active chapter. We got everything from insect specialists to astrophysicists to economics experts, all kinds of folks. And so we're very excited about the word that we're spreading throughout the state. In terms of tonight's programs, I think I actually attended the last one. It was a webinar, and so this is a little different. You guys, I think, may have noticed the difference. You could see each other as far as the MoNet members. We do have members on Facebook Live right now. I'm hoping that's streaming fine. I think it is so far. So if you're a MoNet member, you will be able to see each other, and you can just ask questions literally at the end by just simply asking them. And the people on Facebook Live, our guests, will be able to put them into the Facebook Live question box, and we'll relay those to our speaker. The way the program is working tonight is it is being recorded. So it'll be, you can check on IDA Missouri's Facebook Live, our Facebook page later to actually replay the recording, and we're placing everyone pretty much on mute during the presentation. We're asking that you hold your questions until the end, simply so that our speaker can get through all of the different materials. And I think she's got about a 45-minute or so presentation, maybe 40 minutes. And again, the Q&A will follow that. And once we get to the point of Q&A, I think we'll be able to explain once again how you can actually ask questions. Depends on how you're coming in, either as a Zoom meeting person attendee or as a Facebook Live person. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Ken, I think, who will introduce our speaker. And I'm going to stop sharing screen here. I can do that. All right. Ken, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here.
Very good.
All right. Well, thank you, Don. I'd like to add my welcome to all our viewers tonight. My name is Ken Biddle, and I'm the program co-chairman with Scott for MONEP. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce our speaker, Lonnie Gatlin. Lonnie is an award-winning photographer with more than 30 years of experience. Her work has been recognized and used by many businesses and associations, including the American Association of Business Communicators, the American Red Cross, St. Louis Community College, and United Way. In 2008, Lonnie won Scott Kelby's first worldwide photo walk for the St. Louis region. In the years from 2010 to 2016, she won several top honors in the St. Louis Photographer Showcase, and the showcase winner in the year 2012. Then in 2017, she won the best show and the best of show in the Wildlife Art and Photography exhibition. And you can see her images if you're in the St. Louis area and at the various galleries that are here. Currently, Lonnie's really best known for her Astro nightscapes, especially as she travels around the country photographing the Milky Way from the best locations and at the most optimum times. She also teaches landscape astrophotography at Shaw Nature Reserve, located here in the St. Louis area. So sit back and enjoy this presentation. Relax, and I promise you it will be both inspiring and educational. So welcome, Lonnie. The stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, IDA Missouri, and thank you, MONEP, and especially you, Ken. You almost got me in tears there for a minute. So give me 1 second and I'll kick this show off here. Okay, are you seeing my screen yet?
No, I'm not. First screen.
Oh, no, no.
Not seeing the screen.
No. I'm trying to stand by. Here we go.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Oh, it is. There it is.
Good.
Here we go. How's that looking? Everybody see it?
Very good. We can see it just fine.
Looks great. One more second. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. Good evening and welcome to Landscape Astrophotography. In tonight's presentation, we're going to discover and explore what it's like to take landscape photos featuring the beautiful Milky Way. I'll talk a little bit about camera gear, planning the shot, the apps that I use, the shooting methods that I use, exposure, of course. I'll also talk a little bit about lighting techniques, and I'll leave you with some resources that you can use for your further research. So, but as we all know, the best way to learn astrophotography or basically anything is really to get out there and do it. So I'm hoping that through this presentation tonight that I inspire you and that you do so. Well, I started shooting astro landscapes way back in 2012, and I'll tell you that technology has changed tremendously. Image quality is greatly improved. The camera sensors are improving. The noise reduction software is getting better. And there's star stacking software now. And photographers, they're embracing new and different ways to actually approach shooting astro landscapes. Trying to get it to move for me. Stand by here. But you know what? You really don't need expensive camera gear to get into shooting astro landscapes. Really what you need to have is you need a camera that you can manually set the f-stop, the shutter speed, and most importantly, the ISO. My participants at the Shaw Nature Reserve have used a variety of cameras, including full frame, crop sensor camera, the APS-C, and some of them even have used the Micro Four Thirds. Now, the only caveat that you really get into insofar as using the smaller sensor cameras is that you have a little bit more noise to have to deal with, which I'll talk about a little bit later. You do need a fast wide angle lens, f2.8 or lower for astro landscapes. And the key here is that they're very affordable these days. You certainly can do some research out on the web and find out more about them. But the key here, though, is that we want to make sure that we allow as much light to enter the camera as possible. So you can use an f4 lens. However, what's going to happen is that you will, and I confidently tell you, you will increase your ISO by at least one stop. So as I said, the lenses are very affordable these days. Like, for example, the Rokinon. You can get a Rokinon 14 millimeter or possibly even wider, anywhere between $300 and $500. So if you're just jumping off in this genre of photography, you certainly want to do some research to see what's out there. You'll need a sturdy tripod, obviously, because we're going to be shooting long exposures. Some of those might be seconds, some of those might be minutes, and so we want to make sure that we keep the camera as stable as possible. That also means you're going to need maybe a basic remote to trigger the exposure as well, again, to prevent camera shake. However, you may be interested in purchasing an intervalometer if your camera isn't capable of shooting longer than 30 seconds. That will certainly help alleviate that problem. I tell you confidently that a headlamp with a red light is very, very usable. Why? Because it allows your hands to be free to make adjustments on your camera. And with the red light turned on, it really doesn't affect your night vision, which is very important when you're shooting in the dark. What will happen though is if you turn on your white light, for example, to readjust and go back to your night vision, it may take 20 to 30 minutes to get used to seeing in the dark again. So again, a headlamp is going to be very useful. If you don't know where the Milky Way is, a compass or even an app is going to be helpful, and we'll talk about that in the tools that I use just a little bit later. One tool that I do use frequently too is a lens warmer, and I use that, and basically it's just a little wrap that goes around your lens that helps keep the lens warm to prevent lens or condensation from forming on that lens. I also happen to carry a Cannabear spray along with me because there are many times when I'm out in remote areas by myself and I just want a little bit of added protection. That's just more of a mental thing, I think, than anything. I will tell you that it's important to note that not every wide angle lens is good for shooting the night sky. There are issues like sharpness, vignetting, and this thing called coma, okay? And basically what coma is it turns your stars, or it adds little wings, I should say, to your stars. But there's been a lot of research on wide angle lenses that are good for astrophotography. All you really need to do is open up Google and search for the best astrophotography lenses. You can also check out Ian Norman's website, lonelyspec.com. This photographer has done a lot of research on the various brands, including Nikon and Canon and Sony, as well as Fujifilm. So he's done the research. Take a look at what he's saying about the lenses insofar as astrophotography is concerned. I have used a variety of wide angle lenses, including the Rokinon. I've used the Nikon 14 to 24 2.8, and I currently use the Tamron 15 to 30 at 15 millimeters 2.8, and I also have the Sigma Art 14 millimeter 1.8. So that basically tells you I'm very serious about my hobby. But those are all good lenses, but you can find out more about what, you know, what good wide angle lenses there are in the market by simply doing a little bit of research. So the key for anything, especially in astro landscape photography, is planning. Planning is your key to success. Your key considerations are going to be what location or foreground are you going to want to shoot? Is the celestial object, such as the Milky Way, visible in the sky at the time that you want to shoot? All of which I'll cover in just a minute. Is the moon visible? Is the sky dark enough? And is the weather cooperating, or is it clear of skies? There are numerous apps and websites all out there to help you make informed decisions about these questions. But I'll say the most challenging of these is the consideration in finding a dark sky where the Milky Way is not obscured by light pollution. I'll say that there are locations in Missouri that have very dark skies, okay? Like Ironton and Eminence. Unfortunately, our state parks, most of them close at sunset unless they offer, you know, camping or fishing. However, you can get, and I have gotten permits to shoot in certain areas that close after dark. You just need to do a little bit of research. Our national parks, like the one here in Missouri, the Ozark National Scenic Riverways, is open 24 hours. So that certainly is located in a very dark sky, as you'll see just momentarily. But I will tell you, before you venture out, you know, given the current pandemic, you want to make sure that the park that you're planning to shoot on, whether it be the national park or a state park, whether you have a permit or not, you want to make sure the park is open so that you can go there. But how do you really find a location to shoot? Well, you can take a virtual drive on Google Maps. I've done that plenty of times. You can take a real drive, and I do that all of the time. You can do a lot of research on the web. You can ask photographers like myself. You can attend workshops, seminars, and things like this. And you can get some tips about where in your neighborhood, you know, or in your state might be good for actually shooting. So those certainly are some ways to find places to shoot at night. I found this location, for example, when I took a drive in an area that I know that has a dark sky. But I will tell you that scouting a location is best done during the daytime. It's helpful to familiarize yourself with the location to potentially alert you to any dangers, such as animals or bears. And in my case, if you look at this image, those corn stalks were very dangerous because I could have tripped over them in the dark. So scouting a location during the day also is helpful to help reduce your fears about shooting in that location at dark. The more you know about where you're going to be and what the potential risks are, and take a friend, the more you're going to be more confident in being out there in the dark in that particular area. When scouting a location, I use an app called PhotoPill. Some of you probably are aware of that. It has a feature called Night Augmented Reality. And so basically what I do, that's installed on my mobile phone. It's available for Android and also iOS, Apple devices. So basically when I'm out in the field, I start up Night AR and I set a date and time for when I think the Milky Way is going to be at the location that I plan to shoot. So just using my finger across the screen, I can scrub the time on that specific date, and I can actually determine at what point in time either the moon might be present or the Milky Way is in a position that I want to photograph it over this particular landscape. Very easy to use. Here's the image that I shot from that previous scout location. While I use limited features of PhotoPills, I really like an app called Planet for Photographers to create actually my Milky Way plan. It offers numerous features. For example, my favorite is a Google map that I can position the Milky Way over that real-time map and see when the galactic core, the brightest area of the Milky Way, is going to be over my subject. I can also enter the type of lens, the focal length of the lens that I'm going to be using, and that will tell me exactly from the position, in this case on the beach, how much of the area that I'm going to be seeing with that particular lens. It has other features too, like if you want to take a panorama, it will tell you how many frames to shoot at what degrees if you want to do that. It's loaded with features, but I will tell you, it's from a user interface perspective and coming from a background of software development, it takes some time getting used to it, but it's worth the time that you put into using the tool. And so I highly recommend it. This is actually the plan that I used for shooting Rocky Falls way back in September 2017. Let's take a look at that image. So Rocky Falls, as I'm sure most of you know, is located in Eminence, Missouri. And it's located in a very dark sky, a Bortle class 3, which I'll explain what that means a little bit later. I used a small LED light panel to light up the falls. And had I not done that, and it was set at very low power, but had I not used that LED light panel, what you would have seen when I took that photograph featuring the Milky Way would have just been a silhouette of the trees, and you wouldn't have seen really the falls themselves. But even using that light panel, I will tell you that it took 24 minutes to make the exposure for this image. 12 minutes was for the actual exposure, and then another 12 minutes was necessary for long exposure noise reduction. But how do you know if the sky is going to be dark enough in the area that you picked or the location that you plan to shoot? Well, I'll tell you that dark skies can be easily determined using a free website called lightpollutionmap.info. The dark sky scale that you see there at the left is called the Bortle class. The best starry photos are taken in classes 1 through 3. Basically, that's a dark sky area. The brighter the sky, the dimmer the Milky Way is going to be. However, it's important to note that though you may be physically located in a brighter Bortle class, as the Milky Way rises throughout the night, it may be well rising into a darker sky or Bortle class. Case in point, if you look at the map there with all those bright colors on it, you'll see that top purple arrow is pointing right at Hermann, Missouri, okay? It basically is in a Bortle class 4. However, as the Milky Way rises throughout the night, and you'll notice that in the west and in the south, the sky is a little bit darker according to the Bortle class scale. But as the Milky Way rises throughout the night, it's actually rising into a darker sky. So I would tell you confidently that you can take beautiful pictures just outside Hermann, Missouri, which isn't really far away. Now, if you look a little bit lower on that map, down at Eminence, Missouri, you'll see it's right up there in the dark sky area. Let's take a look. So this is an image that I shot in Hermann, Missouri. Although there is a lot of light pollution over there on the left, that's actually the light pollution coming from Hermann. It looks as though the sun is rising. So as I mentioned, as the Milky Way rises, you see that it's rising away from that pollution. So I was able to make a great photo right outside of Hermann, Missouri. The Bisty Badlands, though, in New Mexico has a very, very dark sky, a Bortle class 2. That green color that you see in the photo is referred to as air glow, which is basically a faint emission of light caused by cosmic rays striking the upper atmosphere. But your eyes can't see the air glow, but the camera certainly can record it. At Shaw Nature Reserve in Gray Summit, Missouri, it's a Bortle class 5. And I'll tell you that you can't or can hardly see the remnants of the Milky Way out at Shaw Nature Reserve. But as you can see in this example of a photograph taken there, you can photograph it, and it photographs beautifully there. That's through long exposure. So the next step in our planning process really is, and this is one of the key, is to know whether the weather is going to be suitable in the location that we plan to shoot, okay? If the cloud cover is 10% or less, okay, this is my prerequisite, I will drive 2 to 4 hours to a location. If it's greater than that, the chances are, you know, it may obscure the Milky Way or whatever celestial body I'm planning to shoot there. I use several models to determine whether the weather forecast is going to be cooperating. For example, I use Weather Underground because it provides the expected conditions in that location. It's like any other website. You plug in the city or the town in this case, and it will give you the forecast for that area. So what I'm particularly interested in, though, when I'm looking at a particular town is I want to know what the cloud cover is going to be in that area. And obviously, I want to know if there's any precip. But I can also figure out by looking at the dew point and looking at the expected temperature if there's going to be any fog. So I take this information that I gleaned from Weather Underground, and then I'll bounce it up against yet another weather source, in this case, NOAA. If you look at that third graph that has the blue line on it, basically that is the sky cover, or a sky cover graph. That tells me from what time to what time the clouds are going to roll in and roll out of the area that I'm coming into to shoot the Milky Way. So the key here for me, or my takeaway, and yours I hope, is that you can determine how much shooting time you're going to have in that area. So if you have, you know, maybe 1 or 2 hours of shooting time, that may be worth the drive down to Imminence, or it may not be. That's a determination that you need to determine, I should say. I also use another tool called Clear Outside. It's available as an app for iOS and also Android, but you can also find it on the web. What Clear Outside does is it quickly conveys the weather conditions to me at a glance, given a location, using those color-coded boxes that you see there on the screen. I simply expand the particular date, and I can look at the first row of those blue boxes and quickly know if the cloud cover is going to be too great for me to travel. So I take all of this information and I put it together, and I can decide from using these 3 different models, you know, who's right, or are at least 2 of them right, in order to make a, you know, informed decision to drive to the specific area. There's another tool too that I also noted there on the slide you might want to check out. It's pretty cool. It's just available on the web. It's called Ventusky, or at least that's how I pronounce it. So the spelling is ventusky.com, and it will tell you, you know, at any particular time in real time, you can actually see the clouds go across, as well as a lot of other information. So check it out as well. But when is the best time to shoot the Milky Way? Well, first let me say this. The Milky Way is always visible on a clear night sky because the Earth resides in the Milky Way galaxy, right? So sometimes we just see a band of stars, but other times chasers like myself are primarily interested in photographing the Milky Way's galactic core, which is that bright area that you see with the big red arrow pointing to it. Well, the Milky Way galactic core is actually visible at only a specific time during the year in the northern hemisphere and different in the southern hemisphere. And from March through November, you'll see the galactic core rise above the horizon. But in March, you'll see the core in the wee hours in the morning just before sunrise. In November, you'll see it just after it gets dark and just before it starts to set. So it's up very shortly. But it's best to shoot the Milky Way during the new moon, which boils down to there's no moon. But I'll give you a little tip. You don't have to limit your shooting of the Milky Way just to a specific new moon date. You usually have 2 to 3 days before the new moon and after the new moon to shoot the Milky Way, provided the weather is good, right? But you also have to take into consideration what time is the moon rising in conjunction with the Milky Way rising or setting. So you may have a very good, 2 hours of shooting on a clear night on those days prior to and right after the new moon. So you certainly want to check it out. Obviously, I talked about the skies need to be clear, but it's important to shoot the Milky Way at night, and that occurs right after astronomical twilight. So when does astronomical twilight actually occur? Well, it occurs anywhere from 1.5 to 2 hours before sunrise and 1.5 to 2 hours after sunset. That's when the sky is the darkest, and that's when, in my experience, you want to photograph the Milky Way. So the Milky Way rises during the Milky Way season of March to November. It rises in the southeastern sky and appears basically to travel southwest due to the Earth's rotation. So in the early spring, as I mentioned, the Milky Way is going to rise in the wee hours of the morning, just before sunrise, and it's going to appear horizontal or somewhat parallel to the horizon. The galactic core, if that is my elbow, is actually very big at that time. So as the spring progresses to summer and summer progresses to fall, the Milky Way is actually, due to the Earth's rotation, going to start to appear like it's vertical, or with the galactic core here perpendicular to the horizon. So you want to keep that in mind. Essentially, there are three methods for photographing the Milky Way. There is the single exposure, the star stack, and the tracked. All of these methods are used today and are really dependent upon, I guess, the weather and also the time available that you have to shoot it. So let's break down each one of these. So back in the day, I simply captured a single exposure of the Milky Way, and lit the foreground with a small flashlight, okay? This is by far the simplest and the easiest way to get started in astrophotography, because it takes less time and it takes a lot less skill to post-process the image, okay? So I'll talk a little bit about light painting. It's not really difficult to do. There are some techniques that I'll go over just then. But when you're getting started in landscape astrophotography, the single image is probably the best way to go. As you progress in your experience, the star stack process is obviously going to take a lot more time to not only shoot and process, but I'll tell you that the advantages far outweigh the time in my humble opinion. And the advantages are this: the end result of your picture is going to have a lot less of that noise or grain that we don't like in our images. The key point is that high ISO is actually reduced in the stacking process. And why? And it's because noise appears in random areas of the image, okay? Therefore, as the images are stacked, okay, the noise in each is overlaid by the other where the noise is not. So it renders a cleaner, less noisy image, especially when you're shooting at high ISOs, obviously. Another key point too is that short sky exposures are going to eliminate star trailing, resulting in pinpoint sharp stars. Let's kind of deconstruct this image that I have here that I'm showing you. This is an example of the star stack that I did back in 2015. It consists, as you see, of 12 images that took almost 40 minutes to image. I shot the sky at ISO 6400 at f2.8, and I set my white balance to 4200 Kelvin. I usually set my white balance anywhere between 4200 and 4500 because to me that renders a more natural looking sky. So when I did the stack, what I did was I shot 10 consecutive images of the sky at 10 seconds each. That was my stack, my star stack. Then I shoot the foreground. And in this case, I did a focus stack because I wanted to render as much depth of field in the image as possible. So the foreground was shot at ISO 1600 at f5.6, and again, the 4200 Kelvin for the white balance. Now, the key here is that there were two images taken, right? And each one of those images took 18 minutes to make, 9 minutes for the exposure and 9 minutes for long exposure noise reduction. Once I get back home, I load all of those images into Lightroom. As far as the star stack goes, in Lightroom, the only adjustment that I'm really making is I'm ticking the little flag that says remove chromatic aberration. Then what I'll do is I'll just export those 10 images out to a folder setting on my desktop as TIFF files. Then I'll launch Starry Landscape Stacker for the Mac, which costs about 40 bucks these days. And I'll tell Starry Landscape Stacker to take the 10 images, and what it will do is automatically bring those images into and create a composite image of those 10 pictures. All I'm really doing is, in Starry Landscape Stacker, is I'm actually outlining to differentiate for the application what is the sky and what is the ground. That whole process probably takes maybe 5 minutes once you get used to doing it. And it's really not a complicated application at all. If you're a PC user on the other side, you can use a tool that's free. It's called Sequator, and it basically does the same thing as Starry Landscape Stacker. It creates a composite. It takes all of your star images and creates one final image. That then what you can do is you can take the foreground that you shot at a lower ISO, remember to reduce, again, high noise, and merge those two together very easy, or blend them very easily in Photoshop. In 2019, though, I tried another approach to shooting astro landscapes. And really basically what it is it's a combination of using the star stack, and I decided I would shoot the foreground at blue hour, okay? Well, the problem with doing that is that I was waiting a long time for the Milky Way to rise and get into the position that I wanted, in this case, over the barn. And so it may not be the most conducive, but in this case, because the flowers in the foreground was so beautiful, I was willing to wait it out. So whether you shoot a single exposure or a star stack and a foreground, it's important to note that when you're shooting these, the tripod never moves, okay? If the tripod moves when you're shooting a star stack, aligning and blending these images, the sky and the foreground together, is going to be very difficult, okay? And the star stacking software may have problems doing it. Now, if you accidentally maybe, just hit the leg of the tripod, you may get away with, the software may be able to handle easily aligning the images so that then you can blend the foreground and the star stack together. So just be very wary if you go down this road, that if you bump that tripod, you may be starting right over again with what you were shooting. In 2017, I went down another road. I started shooting astro landscapes using a star tracker this time. Again, attempting to reduce noise through using a lower ISO. Star trackers like the Sky Watcher Star Adventure, this is the one that I use, allow me to take longer exposures at lower ISOs, again, to reduce noise, and also produce beautiful and many more details in the Milky Way, because I'm doing a longer exposure of the Milky Way itself. However, while the stars are not blurred, because the star tracker is setting on an equatorial mount and it is tracking with the rotation of the Earth, the stars aren't creating trails, but your foreground is definitely going to blur. So in order to handle that, what I did was, before I actually started the tracker moving, I shot the foreground. Once I shot the foreground, and the same details insofar as the Kelvin and the f-stop and things like that, I retained. So once I shot the foreground, I started the tracker. And then I was able to easily then blend the two images together to create this picture that you see here that I shot in 2017. Total of 7 minutes. Let's talk about exposure now. You're probably wanting to know, what's the right exposure. Before you head out to shoot anything, you need to set your camera's basic settings, okay? You need to make sure that the camera is set and the lens are set in manual mode. You want to set the aperture to your wide angle lens at its lowest possible f-stop, okay? You want to go ahead and set your white balance, whether you use auto or you use a Kelvin of 4200 or 4500, depending on what you prefer. The key though is as long as your camera is set in RAW, you can make just adjustments right when you're post-processing the image. So when you're at a location though, you need to determine what the ISO is that you're going to use, and that is dependent upon how dark the location is. So the ISO that I use over at Shaw Nature Reserve and out in the Bisty Badlands are gravely different. So you'll want to determine that when you're on location. And I'll give you a little bit more tips here in just a minute. But the shutter speed, on the other hand, is really going to be based on the focal length of the lens that you're using. Because especially if you have any concern about star trailing at all. And I'll cover that in just a minute. But once you're on location, you need to take some test shots. We're shooting digital, right? There's no reason why that we can't test to see, what's going to be the right ISO. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll adjust my ISO in one-stop increments. So if I start out at 1600, then I'll go to 3200, and then I'll go to 6400, and so on and so forth. And then what I'll do is I'll bring up the image on my screen, and I'll look at the histogram, okay? I need to see separation with the blacks on the left and the midtones on the right. If there isn't that little peak in there between, you're going to be underexposed. And trying to fix that in post-processing, you know, could be very challenging. It's going to get particularly grainy. So if you see that the histogram is all smashed all the way over to the left into the blacks, then just increase your ISO and do your ISO test again and see, you know, how that works out for you. Whether or not you use long exposure noise reduction is going to be determined on whether or not you're doing a long exposure. If you're doing anything over 30 seconds, you're probably going to want to turn on long exposure noise reduction. But you're only doing that if you are shooting the foreground, okay? Because when you start shooting longer than 30 seconds, that you'll see in just a minute, your stars are going to start to trail. Now that's a whole nother genre of landscape astrophotography that you can get into. So you also are going to want to check to make sure that you don't have condensation on your lens when you're out shooting in the field. Just some keys. So set your basic setting, and then when you're out there, do some ISO tests to figure out what is the ideal ISO for the area that you're shooting in. So as I mentioned earlier, unless you're shooting a star stack, which is always going to be, and what I use, is always going to be 10 shots at 10 seconds at ISO 6400 at 2.8 or 3.2 or whatever, okay? You're also going to want to know how many seconds can you shoot the particular wide angle lens that you have, how many seconds you can shoot at, as far as your shutter speed is concerned, before the stars actually start trailing, okay? There's a very easy formula that you can use to determine that. So hopefully this will be clear when I'm through with it. So if you're shooting full frame, it's very simple. All you're going to do is either use the 500 rule, which is commonly found out on the web, but I prefer to use the 300 rule, and that's come from my testing, okay? But you can test both of those, and the formula is basically the same. All you do is divide 500 or 300 by the focal length of your lens. That will tell you approximately how many seconds that you can shoot that lens at using your shutter speed before the stars actually start to trail, okay? If you're shooting a crop sensor camera, the formula is more complicated, but it's really not much. But the key is that you need to figure out what the true focal length of your crop sensor lens is, and this is how you do it. So your crop sensor lens happens to be a 14 millimeter. So you're either shooting a Nikon, a Canon, a Fuji, or a Sony. So you need to know what the crop factor of that camera is, and you can look it up on the web. Most times it's either going to fall in 1.5 or 1.6. So what you do then is your lens is 14 millimeter, so you just multiply 14 millimeter by 1.5 or 1.6, and that will give you the true focal length of that lens if it were being used on a full frame camera. So once you know that, the focal length of your lens, then all you're going to do is take that result, okay, divide 500 by 21 in this case, that's 23 seconds, or in my case, I would divide 300 by 21, and that would tell me I can shoot that lens at 13 or 14 seconds, okay? Be aware, though, that these are guidelines. As we just talked about with setting your ISO and determining what's the best ISO out there, you will learn all of these things. Once you determine how many seconds you can shoot that lens at, you'll never have to do it again. So when I go out and I shoot with my Tamron 15 to 30, I know at 15 millimeter, I'm usually going to be shooting anywhere from 13 to 15 to 20 seconds. When I take the shot, I bring the image up on my screen, I zoom in and look at the stars and see if I have any trailing, because I prefer not to have trailing in my images, and then I'll go from there. Okay. we can improve the quality of our astro landscapes through some lighting techniques. But you know, like landscape photos, we want our viewers to experience the moment that we had when we triggered that shutter, right? So by adding just a little bit of light, either through a long exposure or through some artificial light, which I call simulated starlight, that will bring the viewer into the image and let them see what you saw when you were shooting it, right? If you don't do that, that's fine. That might be your goal, but what you're going to end up with a dark foreground, maybe silhouetted trees, you know, against a dark sky. And that's all good if that's the goal that you're trying to achieve. I'm not trying to deter you from doing that, but I will say, keep that in mind. So I like to add a little bit of light that is very portable when I shoot my astro landscapes. I don't always, but I mostly do, okay? There are several lighting techniques that you can use for shooting an astro landscape. You obviously can use natural light through the long exposure, or you can use a technique called low-level landscape lighting, which basically uses a constant light source set at a very, very low power. If you're able to see that light that you're lighting, either in this case, the teepee or the sod house or their grasses, if you're able to see that, you know, with your naked eye, it's probably going to be too bright. So most times what I will do is I will use, you know, different lights. In this case, I had a little blow-up solar light that was sitting on the inside of the teepee. On the far right, I used a little LED panel, which I'll show you in just a minute. And way off in the distance there, I used a lume cube to light up the sod house. But the key here is that we're trying to simulate, you know, starlight to make it look as natural as possible. Well, Wayne Pinkston and Royce Baer are really the two prominent nightscape photographers who kind of popularized low-level landscape lighting. And you can learn more about their techniques a little bit later as I give you some resources. Another light painting technique that you can use is you can use a low-powered flashlight to actually light paint either the grasses or whatever the subject matter is. But the key is light painting takes a lot of practice, okay? And it can be very challenging. Too much light is going to make the scene look unnatural, and too little light is going to render an underexposed image, right? So you need to be very careful if you decide to go down that road and do a lot of practice with that flashlight and lighting the subject just exactly how you like it. One of the guys that I found on YouTube, his name is Richard Tatti, that's T-A-T-T-I. He's a master at doing light painting with small flashlights. And you might want to check him out. Pretty cool, okay? This is my lighting kit. So as I mentioned, that little blow-up light there that you see, the solar light there, that was inside the teepee. That LED panel there, the newer, cost about $30, okay? And it comes with the tungsten filters that you see there. And then the lume cube, out of all the tools that you see here, was probably the most expensive thing as far as lighting goes that I've purchased, because all of the accessories for it are separate. So if you go down that road, you want to take a look at all the accessories that come with it before you put out the bucks for that. When I am light painting with the flashlight, the LED Lenser T72 is my preferred tool. But that's my kit. That's what I take with me if I'm planning on, lighting the astro landscape. A few tips when it comes to lighting, okay? You never want to light the image or your subject from the same angle as the camera. You want to be able to create depth, and you create that depth by positioning the lights either to the right or to the left of where the camera is, okay? You want to use soft diffused light, and you want to filter LED lights. Unless you want that image to take on blue tones, you're certainly going to want to gel up your LED lights with maybe a tungsten or an orange filter to kind of attempt to balance the overall color of the scene. The other thing too is you want to raise the light off of the ground, because if it's closer to the ground, it's going to create hot spots all around it. So that's another key that you want to keep if you plan on lighting your astro landscapes. Some final considerations, okay? I can't stress this enough, and I don't know how many times, you know, I say it over and over again, is that you need to learn to navigate your camera's menus. You need to know where to set things like the ISO and long exposure noise reductions. Now, some of the modern cameras that are out there, I should say even most cameras out there, you can set up a custom menu in your menus that will allow you to quickly jump to those things that you need to change when you're out in the field. Because when you're in a really dark area, like in Monument Valley, which is where I was in this picture, you can't see, okay? And so with the aid of your red light, it's not gonna help you with your menus. You're gonna need to know which menu to go in to make those changes. You're also gonna want to know how to focus whatever your preferred landscape lens is for astrophotography at infinity. That's simple to do, okay? There's several ways that you can do that. You can go out on your deck or in your backyard and put your camera on a tripod and focus on a distant subject. Then if you look at the lens itself, you should see the infinity symbol with a little hash in there, and you can see where infinity actually is on that lens. Now I know some lenses don't have the infinity symbol and the hash that shows you when infinity is aligned, but we can deal with that in just a minute. So once you've determined what infinity focus is for your particular lens that you just, you know, shot off your deck with, you can use your mobile phone to take a picture of it so you have something for reference in the future. Or if you're planning on going out in the evening, you can take maybe some painter's tape or something that doesn't have a lot of residue on it and tape down the focusing ring on the lens to kind of hold it in position. But what I like to do is when I'm out in the field, I will turn live view on in the camera, okay? And I'll find a medium bright star, not the brightest and not the lowest, but I'll find a medium bright star and I'll zoom in with live view and then I'll rack my focus back and forth until I see that star become its smallest pinpoint size. A lot of times when the star becomes its pinpoint size, you'll actually start to see other stars that are more dimly lit kind of flicker, you know, on your screen. That tells me that I've reached infinity focus when I'm using live view to focus on a star. So you want to do that. Those are some final considerations insofar as, you know, out in the field and having a better handle, because they certainly are going to help you reduce the frustration when you're in the field trying to look through menus and trying to figure out where infinity is on your lens. And if you're more prepared, as I talked about earlier, the more you plan, the more, you know, rewarding the experience is going to be for you. And you'll find, as I do, that each time I go out, I stop for a moment and I look at the beautiful sky, you know, before I start shooting, and just take in the enormous beauty of it, because it's so moving to me, and I can't highly recommend it more. I'll tell you too that there are, in closing, before we get into question, there's a ton of information out on the web that you can learn more about landscape astrophotography, or some people call it nightscape photography. It just depends. But there's a lot of information out on the web that you can get. These guys I highly recommend. I've worked with Adam, and I've worked with Wayne, and they're outstanding. You can actually get tutorials from Adam on his shooting technique, and basically Adam was my mentor way back when. Wayne Pinkston is one of the gurus of low-level landscape lighting, and his colleague Royce Bear has written a very good book, A Guide to Photographing the Starry Night Sky, which is an ebook that you can download and get a load of information and, you know, launch your interest in this genre of photography. Milky Way Mike, he's out on YouTube. He's got some great tutorials. But as I said, I mean, there's a lot of information out there. And really, you can listen to all the people, you know, and all their guidance, and me as well. But the key is to get out there and try it and see what it's like. But most importantly, go out and experience nature at night, because it's just phenomenal. that concludes my presentation. Now I think we can open it up for questions. Is anybody there? Are you there or there?
Hang on a second. Yep. Folks should be able to unmute themselves now. I believe that they should be able to unmute themselves. And we will have two types of questions, folks. If you're on Facebook Live, I will check in just a moment and start checking for questions. And if you're with MONEP, which is on Zoom, all you have to do is simply ask the question. But you have to unmute yourself first. So I think we should be able, hang on one second, make sure I got it to where you can unmute themselves. Yep, you should be able to do that. So everybody can just unmute themselves. Okay, good.
What questions do you guys have? I know I covered a lot of material, and hopefully I can answer your questions.
Lonnie, I may have missed it. Are you shooting Canon or Nikon?
Which day is it? No. I'm shooting Nikon now, but you know what? I also shoot Fujifilm. So I will shoot Fujifilm on my tracker, just lighter. And since I'm using a lower ISO, you know, and it's, you know, going for, you know, 4 to 8 minutes, it doesn't matter. Obviously, if I, you know, have, you know, use a camera that has more megapixels, I'm going to get more detail, but you know, I'm fine with shooting that on the tracker.
Since you shoot both, do you find, I find the Canon, I don't think they handle the higher ISOs as well. Do you find the Nikon outperforms the Canon?
Well, here's what I'll say about it. Canon users, I still love you. I used to shoot Canon professionally. And when I jumped off in astrophotography, you know, it seems like forever ago, I was shooting Canon, okay? And one of the first images that came out, I was so excited. I was so excited. And I got I loaded the image to my computer, and it looked like somebody kind of poured sand on my picture. And so it's like, okay, if I'm going to do this, you know, you saw one of the pictures actually that was shot with Canon. I don't know how Canon is these days. I haven't shot with it probably in about 5 years. So I can't say that, you know, today it's, you know, any less better than Canon or Nikon or on par with Sony or any of those things, you know.
So Lonnie, we have a question from Facebook about what was the name of the app with the night augmented reality?
PhotoPills.
PhotoPills.
I think it runs about $10 in the App Store.
I think that's right. That's what I looked.
It's a great tool. It has, a mode for the moon, the sun, obviously the augmented night reality. It can tell you, if you want to shoot star trails, it can tell you, depending on what you want the trail to look like, it can tell you how many seconds, for how many hours you need to shoot it. It has a lot of information, and it's a good tool, especially for the field. The Planet Pro tool itself, I use on my my tablet, and so I do all the planning obviously before I get out into the field. So, but there are times when I'm out, I'll use PhotoPills to do a quick plan. So it's a good tool. All these tools though just take a little. There's a little learning curve. Okay, so you might get frustrated at first, but once you have the basics of the tool, you'll be fine. I wouldn't worry about it. It's like learning anything new, right? You had to learn your camera, you had to learn your menus. So it'll take a little bit.
So Lonnie, do you ever use your camera connected to a laptop at the same time? In other words, there's Nikon Backyard, which is pretty cool. You can actually zoom in and set it up to take photos, and it's kind of like doing what you do on a camera, but a little bit more, I guess, software.
I haven't, but I have been exploring doing some deep space, and talk about something that has a learning curve. I've done a little bit of deep space, just with my you know, as you saw earlier with my Star Adventure with, you know, 500mm mounted on top of it. But I know that, you know, there are tools that you can hook up your telescope to, and that can do all the guiding for you, and a number of other things. That's my dog CJ over there.
Somebody wants to get out.
Yeah, I think she's probably tired of listening to me talk to myself.
I had a question.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever heard of IRIX lenses?
Yes, I have, and I have a friend that is using, I think, the 15mm one.
The 15mm. There's a Firefly, and I think it's a Brookstone or a
yes,
Blackstone.
I think that the one that's not plastic.
That's
So
the upper one, yeah. The Blackstone or whatever it's called.
She's using that, and I'll tell you what, from a focusing in the dark perspective, setting that camera to infinity, or setting that lens to infinity, is infinity. I think you'll find that if you get into this, infinity is really not infinity on a lot of lenses, particularly, you know, Nikon. If this is infinity, and infinity is the middle of the infinity symbol, it's not infinity on the lens. So that's what I was talking about earlier. But on that lens, infinity is infinity, and I believe it clicks in.
It does. It locks, and then the one of the reasons I was looking at is that it has filters built into it, just like an L series Canon lens would have, to prevent water and condensation and things like that inside the lens and dust. But it also on the controls on the lens, if you hit it with an ultraviolet light, it will glow in the dark.
That's nice.
You can actually see which connections you are without turning on a light.
Yes, that's
so
very
it
nice.
looks. I don't know if I can show you that or not.
Have you tested that at night to see how the coma is? Like, do your stars look?
I
like
have not. I have not. I don't have the lens yet. I'm looking at buying it. So that's why I was wondering if you had any experience with it.
Give me 1 second. I think I better let her out. That's a warning.
Hold it.
By the way, Scott, I think Barb, did you print the one I had on photo, the app? Did you send that one out to everybody on the last newsletter?
Barb isn't. I don't think she's.
Oh, she's not there?
Muted. She's not. She's muted.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did. That's okay. I did a review on that the
Right.
photo app she's speaking of, and I was just Photo Pills.
Photo Pills, PILLZ, correct?
PILLS.
It's S.
Oh, it's S. It's not a Z. Okay, I don't know. Anyway, that is yeah, right
She's
there.
back.
And there's Lonnie.
Cool.
We were talking about Photo Pills. Jerry has wrote up an article on it, which I sent out to the members, I don't know, a few months ago.
Yeah, it's been a little while. Yeah, I use it too. I really like this. It has the sunset, sunrise, moon phase. It's amazing. And plus, you can actually walk out to the site where you're at, hold it up in front of you, and see where the Milky Way is going to be at any given time.
That's exactly why I use it.
It's an amazing program. Yeah, amazing program.
I'll trade you my slides for your your review.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So we have a couple questions from Facebook.
Okay.
One question, it was just more of a comment. It says Stellarium is free. I don't know if you would know what Stellarium is.
I do know what Stellarium is.
That's very commonly used by astronomers. I know that.
Yes, it is, and I do also use that, but I don't really get into it in presentations like this.
Yeah,
it's a little bit more complex to use, but I do. You know, it's going to be more accurate, I think, insofar as determining exactly, especially if you know the longitude and latitude of where you're going. It's going to be more accurate in defining exactly where the Milky Way is, you know, at the location that you're going to. So I'll use that as part of my planning, but when I get into, you know, basic landscape astrophotography, I don't get into it. But yes, I do use that on my MacBook.
Okay, so the next question is your thoughts on MPF rule versus 500 or 300 rules.
Well, you can make it as simple as or as complex as you like. And I try to paint a picture where, I mean, you can actually go out and set your camera, you know, at 30 seconds and 2.8. And if you're not blowing that image up, okay, to something like 11 by 14 or something, and a little bit of star trailing isn't going to matter. I have found that using the 300 rule works for me because I typically use, you know, a 14 or 15 millimeter lens. And when I'm in the field, okay, I still test. If I know that that lens, I can shoot it at 20 seconds, I will still do a test and zoom in on my stars and look at them in the middle of the frame to see whether or not they're trailing. So I like to keep it simple. And so I'll use the 300 rule.
Okay. And the next question, actually I have a couple more questions here. One is about when you did the single exposure method, was your camera fixed on the tripod or tracking?
It was fixed. It was on the tripod. I always, whether I'm shooting, if I'm tracking, obviously the tracker setting on its equatorial mount is sitting on a tripod, right? So whether I'm doing a single exposure, I'm doing a stack, okay, or I'm tracking, it's always on a tripod because we're exposing for seconds and minutes, right? So any movement, you know, is going to cause the picture to blur or the image to blur. Does that make sense? Did I answer the question?
And then somebody commented that Star Stacks is STAX is free for the PC2.
Star Stacks, yes, and it's also available for the Mac as well. I use Star Stack. In fact, I don't even use Star Stacks anymore. I used to use that for Star Trails itself, and it can create some cool stuff like you can get comet looking like star trails in your picture. But when I do star trails, basically what I do is I load up, you know, the number of images that I've shot in Photoshop. So I'm selecting all the images in Lightroom and I'm right clicking on and I'm saying open as layers in Photoshop. And then once all those layers are loaded up in Photoshop, I select them all and I set the blend mode to lighten, and voila, I have a finished star trail picture. Now, obviously, if I have to take trails out, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but I don't use Star Stacks anymore. I did a long time ago, but I don't anymore because I can do it in Photoshop.
Well, that's what I have so far on Facebook, so it looks like we're caught up on there. By the way, any of you that are not able to talk for some reason, you can actually put your questions in the chat box if you're not able to voice for some reason. We will be able to see that.
I have a question about classes. I know that we don't know whether there'll be classes in the fall, but are you scheduled at this point out at Shaw Nature Reserve?
What a great question, Barbara. Thank you.
Well, I've been to one of your classes. It's fabulous.
Thank you. Yes, right now there are 2 classes planned. I don't know if they'll be I mean, you know, it's a day-to-day thing. Right now I'll be teaching a class in August, and that class is already filled. There'll be another one in September. So you'll want to watch Mobot's website for the announcement of that class because I'm pretty sure it's not going to be coming out in a catalog, but I could be wrong. So you have to register through the website, Mobot's website anyway. So watch that. It's in September. I don't know the date off the top of my head. I should have been prepared, but there's another class coming up. And if your members would like to know that, I can certainly send that to you and you can let them know since we got a little bit of time. So
yeah, absolutely.
But I'll tell you, if you are interested in that, you know, you will want to sign up as soon as you can sign up because the class fills up pretty quickly. And right now with social distancing, you know, we may even need to limit the number of participants to even less because, you know, when we're shooting out by the TP, and the TP is covered. And so we have to make sure, you know, that we have, you know, enough distance between everybody to meet the social distancing requirements. So, so the plan is we're going to shoot in August and hopefully in September.
Great.
So we have a question in the chat box. It says, for keeping your lens warm, what's most effective? Do you use hand warmers or a telescope dew strip?
Telescope dew strip. I can show it to you if you want me to grab it out of my bag, but it's, I think it was about, I got it off of Amazon and it was probably about 30 bucks, but you know, I bought a larger battery for it just because when I'm out, I shoot usually, you know, I could be out for 6 hours. And so, you know, from the time that I'm out there and the chillier it's getting, or it may be more humid, but here's kind of what it's very simple. It just wraps around the lens, okay, like this. And then it plugs in with a USB connector like that, right into this giant power bank. And then I leave it in the battery itself. I leave it, you know, in its little case here, and I hang it off my tripod just like that. And as long as the wind isn't blowing, you know, it's pretty stable, just hanging, you know, on the hook on the tripod itself.
So I have a question from Facebook. What website to sign up for the September?
The Missouri Botanical Garden website. It's mobot.org.
www.mobot.org.
Would just repeat that one more time? I think you broke up just a moment there.
www.mobot.org.
Got it. Thank you.
And I believe that will come out August 1st, I believe.
Yeah.
So is there a catalog coming out, Scott?
I do not know for a fact. As a matter of fact, when you said there wasn't one, that you didn't know if there would be one, that's the first I heard of it. I haven't been in close connection. I mean, I have a lot of classes there, but I haven't run one for a couple months. So I think, as you said earlier, everything is in motion and up in the air right now.
So we have another Facebook question. What is the class title on Mobot site?
It's going to be astrophotography.
Okay.
And it would be under the Shaw.
And you're going to look under Shaw Nature Reserve, astrophotography under Shaw Nature Reserve.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, wait a minute, I got another chat here. Oh, I got that taken care of, good. Well, I'm caught up on Facebook so far and nothing else in chat that I can see at least.
I am looking on the Missouri Botanical website. It just says all events and programs remain suspended until further notice. So there's nothing on here about a catalog at this point.
Well, I'm not sure. I know in talking with my contact there that right now we do have a class scheduled for August and one planned for September, but you know, we've had other classes that have been planned and people have registered for them, but you know, due to the unfortunate, you know, situation that we're in right now, you know, it's best that we all just stay safe. There'll be other times for sure. Because I'm not planning on, you know, stop teaching or anything like that, because I mean, this is my favorite genre of photography, most definitely.
Yeah, the fall, early winter catalog typically comes out August 1st. So
yeah, they do have the old one out. It's online. It's not actually, I don't know if it's been printed or not. I was just going through there trying to find your class.
The spring one was printed.
Yeah, the spring, okay, it was printed. Because this one says it goes up to August. Well, that way it wouldn't be in there, would it?
End of August.
No,
okay.
It wouldn't be.
Okay.
It wouldn't be.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it says March through August is what it says. Yeah.
We had a lot planned this year.
Yeah.
It didn't work out that way, you know. you know, you know, as I said, you can definitely glean enough information off the web, and hopefully some takeaways from here that you can go out, you know, with your significant other or something like that, and, you know, go to a dark sky location and try it. And because you're gonna, you know, the first couple of times that you go out and shoot at night, you know, it's just going to encourage you to go more and more. I mean, you'll be so excited about what the results that you get. But as long as you know, do some testing when you're out in the field. I mean, this is digital age, right? I mean, film is free, basically. And CJ agrees. You know, I can control the phones. I can't control the.
You don't have a dog mute? Yeah.
No. And she.
Oh yeah, we have a cat here at the house who's very interested in my laptop right now. That's great.
They're very good at that, aren't they? Just lay right on top of that. Well, I'm good. If you all are good, I mean, you certainly can send some questions off, you know, to Barbara Scott, and I'm glad to entertain some questions by email. It's no problem. And if you want to go out and maybe do, you know, a private lesson, I mean, I can do that too. It's doable. I've done it before, but we have social distance. Wear your mask. Have one with flamingos on it. It's very adorable. So.
Well, thank you so much. That was really, really good.
Great.
Yes, Lonnie, we really appreciate your time, and also Don and the International Dark Skies for helping us go put this on. Appreciate everything everybody's done. And again, as Lonnie said, let's use good common sense out there.
Yeah.
We can still enjoy nature, but don't have to necessarily be shoulder to shoulder.
You know, and Scott too, you know, just a reminder to your members, you know, you can help promote, your members can help, especially those that are out shooting nightscapes. If you can share your images with IDA here in Missouri to showcase how beautiful our skies are here in Missouri, I think that's going to really help promote the beauty of the state. So those are certainly welcome. And you can go out to Dark Sky Missouri, or is it Dark Skies?
Missouri.org, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Missouri.org, and there's more information on how to share your images out there, but we certainly would be interested in you doing that. I think it's important to show. I mean, we do have some fabulous guys here, so let's share those photos.
And by sharing that, I know one of our members, Steve Sands, and I think is also with International Dark Skies, has some photos. And they're doing a lot of work successfully with parks and townships on reducing light pollution. Right. And the more people see that and see the positives of it, I think at least we're tracking that people are paying attention. So,
well, Lonnie, we're getting a lot of thank yous out here, so that's good. I think they said a little overwhelmed. Some people feel a little overwhelmed, but you did a great job. Thanks.
Yeah. Yes. Well, good. Yeah, it's you want to provide as much information to know what you're getting into, but you know what? The bottom line is this: if you got a camera and you got a tripod and you got a remote, go find a dark sky and take some pictures. You'll learn from that. You can take that information back, you know, and look at your metadata and your images and figure out, you know, are your stars trailing or what happens? What do you need to improve? I mean, it's always a learning experience. And even though I've been doing it, you know, for as long as I have, I learn something new every time. So you don't need to spend a lot of money to get started, like I talked about. Just make sure the sky's clear when you go.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks a
lot.
lot.
Guys.
So
Thank you so much.
So Scott, I think our plan is that I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and stop the Facebook Live, and the members here that can hang out for a little bit, we'll have everybody up, and we won't be recording at that point. And we can just do what we want to do there. So get a chance to visit because people have probably not seen each other for a while. So,
right.
All right.
Well, again, Don, thank you so much for all that you've done and all the help you've been.
Oh, that's quite all right. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Lonnie.
Appreciate it.